Hello, and welcome to a new episode of From the Honeycomb podcast. I am your host, Katerina. Each week, we dive into a blend of topics that resonate with the soul. Whether you're an architect enthusiast, have a passion for wanderlust, want to discover holistic approaches to rejuvenate your body and mind, or are intrigued to learn about Vastu Shastra with a modern approach, you've come to the right place. Join me as I sit down with inspiring, like-minded women from various walks of life. We will delve into their journeys to discuss the challenges and moments that define their paths. So sit back, relax, and let the spark of positive energy ignite your curiosity. Hi, it's me, Katerina. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to share with you something that can change the trajectory of your life. If you are ready to start your own architecture firm but are feeling overwhelmed by where to begin, I understand, because I felt the same way when I first embarked on my entrepreneurial journey. This is why I have created the ebook, The Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm. This comprehensive workbook contains everything I wish I had known before starting my own firm. From building a solid business plan to creating your brand, The Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm offers a step-by-step guide tailored to your timeline, whether you're launching your firm today, next month, or in a few years. Dive into essential topics like financial planning, organization strategies, and how to secure your first client, all in one convenient resource. That's right, you don't have to spend hours researching. I have done that for you so you can focus on building your business. And that's not all. With your purchase, you'll also receive an exclusive meditation for business owners, mindfulness tips, a crystal guide for support, and gratitude exercises to help you stay focused and positive throughout your journey. Turn your dream of having your own firm into a reality with the Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm. Click on the link in the show notes to get your copy today. Now, let's dive into the episode. Today, I'm joined by Lis Montoya, founder of Spicy Brains Planner, the planner for any entrepreneur looking for a way to stay organized while prioritizing goals, keeping a gratitude list, and of course, daily planning. Lis, welcome to From the Honeycomb.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. So great to be here.
And as you know, we begin every episode by sharing something that we are grateful for in the present moment. So Lis, what are you grateful for?
In this present moment, I would say I'm grateful for kind of like a slowdown that's happening this month. I feel like I've been go, go, go since this year started, 2024. I've had like my calendar packed with things in my professional life as well as my personal life. And I feel like the next few weeks, it's like calendar open, nothing on the books, and I'm able to just focus on what I love, which is like my hobbies, which I have many of. But yeah, that kind of slowdown that's coming up, I think I'm really grateful for.
Oh, that's great. And I know we talked before the call that you live in Chicago, and I know having lived in Chicago, like summertime is coming too, and that's like the best time in Chicago, I think, than being outdoors. So I think it's a perfect time for you to slow down on everything that you've had going on, and then now you can enjoy even like your summer, which I always thought the summers in Chicago were awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. The sun's been out more. I feel like with spring, we get a lot of rain and cloudy days, which I also
Mm-hmm.
appreciate and I take as wind down days. But this really
Mm-hmm.
energizes me in a way that, it kind of brings like happiness about within me. So
Yeah, oh, I love it. Well, Liz, so share with us how you started your company, Spicy Brains, and the planner that you've created, because I think it is definitely, it's exactly as an entrepreneur, your planner looks exactly to what I already handwrite in my like notebook, because I just do notebook stuff. So where did the idea come from? Kind of tell us where, what that process was like.
yeah, so it all started last year, 2023, in March. I had started seeing this guy at the time that I really cared about. And so we started, having more communication day after day, whatnot. What ended up happening was, I guess one day he kind of like disappeared for a little while, which is
Mm-hmm.
fine. But like my internal, like my thoughts and my emotions, everything that was going on, I felt really intense emotions that I don't usually feel in normal relationships, like in my career, with my family, with my girlfriends, even with my male friends. I started feeling really intense emotions and I couldn't shake them off. There was a lot of like overthinking, almost like fear of abandonment, although nothing had really happened, but I started kind of like spiraling in a way. And that really triggered me to kind of explore that a little more. It's like, why are these feelings so intense? And does everyone experience these sort of like intense feelings of, just overthinking and overall fear? And so, kind of curious about that, I reached out to a therapist at the time. So, that was the first time I had ever been to therapy. I was almost 30 years old. And I always knew, like, I learned a little differently, or my thought process was a little different than my peers in school, than the other people
Mhm.
that I worked with at work. And so, I got diagnosed with really severe, like ADHD, anxiety, like
Mm.
moderate depression, like all these things that
Wow.
it kind of drove me through sort of like an identity crisis, because I
Mhm.
started thinking back on the rest of my life and I'm like, well, all this time, like, was it me? Was it the ADHD? Who am I? And it was
Mhm.
almost like an identity crisis. And so after a few weeks, kept talking to my therapist, kind of digging through a lot of those things. I started realizing like I've actually been coping with a lot of these things already without knowing that I had them. And so, just like you, a big believer in writing things down. I need lists to check off, I need
Mhm.
routine to kind of stay on track. And so, kind of digging into that, I started thinking about other women in general, because according to my therapist, when it comes to ADHD specifically, I'm not an expert, but I do know that women are way better at masking it than men are. And
Mm.
so
Mhm.
when you're looking at little boys like in school and they're like really hyperactive or can't pay attention, can't focus, it's really easy to diagnose and like kind of know what's going on. Versus girls, where like we see these sort of gaps and we try to fill them by doing more or being more
Mhm.
than what we're used to. And so we're really good at masking. And so my therapist had said to me, actually something she said sparked the idea, because she said, women like you have a good career, you have healthy hobbies, you have healthy routines, like no one would ever suspect that you have like a daily struggle with ADHD or anxiety or
Mhm.
even, depression. And she's like, and unfortunately, that's the real life for many women nowadays. Like you see a
Mm.
successful woman, but you never ask, like, what's behind that? And so
Mhm.
that kind of sparked the idea with my planner, just thinking about ways that have helped me be successful throughout the years and sharing that with other women. And so my planner is very women directed, as far as even just like the colors that I use, the artwork that I use that we can get more into, but really just trying to empower these women. Like, you're already awesome, you're already special. And I think, with writing things down, there comes just a whole nother level of power and ability to get things done. So that's kind of how that started.
Wow, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's an incredible story. No, it's always interesting when like those life experiences and like to go through something like that, like you have to think sometimes it's for a reason. And it's like once you go through it and now like I'm sure reflecting back on it, you can appreciate it from a different point of perspective, but it's also allowed you to create something to help other women, which is really beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. I do feel like we're really hard on ourselves a lot of times. And, I think everyone could use therapy, honestly, in my opinion. But I do think that learning these things about yourself will help you be nicer to yourself and also understand that. Sometimes when you're really forgetful, like before, I used to
Mhm.
really beat myself up over like, oh, forgetting this, forgetting that. And like now that I know,
Mhm.
it's like, no, this is like a part of like my mental, I don't want to say illness, disorder, or just, the way that I think or process
Mhm.
information. It's just different. And you have to be nice to yourself in those situations. So
No, absolutely. No, and life is tough and, life happens. And so, yeah, being kind to yourself. And so, can you share with us where your name came up from, Spicy Brains? Because that's such a fun name.
yes. So I think it all goes back to just the core of why I created it.
Mm.
When I was having those emotions that like really made me curious about myself, they were spicy. They weren't like watered down. They weren't particularly calm in any way. Very big emotions and big feelings. I've always had like a big personality to begin with. And then when you experience these emotions, which a lot of time, emotional deregulation is associated with like anxiety and ADHD, and you're not able to control these feelings. Like it felt spicy to me
Mhm.
in a sense that it made sense. And so, yeah, that's kind of how that came about. It's just kind of the intensity behind it. And it's not a bad thing. It's just big emotions, big thoughts with a little bit of spiciness behind it. So
Ah, I like it. Ah, I like the origin then. That's really great. And can you share with us a little bit more about your planner? Like you mentioned, there's a little artwork in there, which I saw on your website. So what is it in your planner that also makes it so different from any kind of the regular planners you see out there?
yeah, so a couple different things. I definitely tried to hit all of the parts that were big for me. So, for example, in my planner, something that helps is color. So, a lot of planners don't
Hmm.
have color, even when it comes to the layout of the planner. And I think for more neurodivergent minds, like having color on a page will actually help your brain be more engaged and continue to be engaged and
Hmm.
looking at a page that's all black and white, but also little cues throughout the planner. And so for the checklists for like priorities or for goals, etc., the check boxes are colored so that, the first two are red, then yellow, then green. So your brain is also prioritizing which are more important, which can maybe wait for later
Hmm.
by color. So like there's like a big red box next to the really urgent one. So like your eyes go there immediately and that's what you kind of want to check
Hmm.
off first. And then with that, just other little things to help specifically more with, ADHD, anxiety. For
Hmm.
example, so the coloring pages. It's a 6-month
Hmm.
planner. Each weekly spread includes a coloring page, a different, beautifully designed by a female artist that I found online. And obviously, we all know the benefits of coloring, especially for
Yes.
really wandering minds. It really does help you
Hmm.
calm. I mean, I did a bunch of trials and whatnot on my own planner before selling it to other women. And it does help you relax or calm down in really stressful moments where you just need to distract your brain with absolutely nothing
Hmm.
else. And there includes a memory bank in each weekly spread, which I think is also important. As someone who's super forgetful, I mean, I'm the type of person that'll walk into a room and forget why I was there
Oh
or
yeah.
why I even walked into the room. And so having a memory bank that you can go back to every week to write down, a date, maybe a little note about anything memorable that happened is really important because when you're looking back at it, you're like, oh yeah, like this happened and the memories kind of start to come back and you're able to process those. And so yeah, for memory. And then one other thing that is more specifically like towards like tracking moods and whatnot is a mood tracker that I included in the weekly spread. So it's just a very simple from 1 to 10 scale every single day. You can use it for whatever you'd like. You can track water, you can track
Hmm.
anything you'd like, but initially it was intended to be a mood tracker. And on my website, I do include like a guide on how to use it, but just tracking almost like your day to day mood and being able to like realize if there is any sort of mood swing or any sort of mood change, why is this happening? And like picking up on patterns throughout your week to realize like, oh, like maybe this is a trigger that is prompting these feelings out of me because it's happened more than once, etc. So really just having that log of your mood and like mood changes, I think helps a lot in knowing how to, own them in a sense.
Hmm. No, and it's the color that really attracted me to your planner at first because I color code. I also like the red, yellow, green, like it's like a traffic light. It totally makes sense. I like that. It attracts me to that. I love to color code, stay organized. And then you incorporate all those little things too. And I know you also have like a gratitude, section as well, which of course we start the podcast with sharing what we're grateful for. So that's something I definitely resonate with and lean on and look for. And so that's why I like the whole format of it. And it encompasses so much. And because, I'm also a very multifaceted, busy person and I want to get so much done. And like your planner really has the room and the space for that without being like also just like too much. Like it's perfectly because then there could be like, I mean, you could end up spending an hour a day planning everything, but you do have it
Yeah.
in good sections, which I really like.
Yeah, and that was actually a big thing as well. Like, I wanted to include, so at the beginning of each week, you have gratitude, affirmations, and intentions. And then at the end of the week, you have space for reflection. So, your wins, challenges, any key learnings, and general thoughts for the week. I didn't want to make it overwhelming. I think that's one of the biggest things for me when I was kind of like planning it out and deciding what would go inside of it. I was looking at other planners like for inspiration to see sort
Hmm.
of like how those were created. And I found myself a lot of times like the planners would have like prompts with like big boxes for like a lot to write in. Like it almost started to
Mhm.
feel like homework. And I
Mhm.
started to like,
Yep.
no, I don't want to do it. And it made
Yep.
me not want to do it because it was overwhelming. And I wanted to include everything in a way that it wouldn't be overwhelming. For the gratitude, intentions, and affirmations, there's space for you to jot down one or two things, but it's not asking you a million questions. It's not
Mhm.
asking you to write a paragraph. It's like in this moment, jot down one or two things, and this is going to kind of help guide your week. And then, same with the reflection. I think it's so important to reflect. And that's one of the ways that I think growth really happens is by looking back and
Mhm.
realizing, like, okay, I did this right, or I did this maybe not so right, and how can I do it better next time? So, same with the reflection at the end, wanted to add space for the reflection to happen without it being overwhelming week over week.
Mhm. No, absolutely, because that's one thing is I've tried journaling, and, like, sometimes I'm good with journaling, but I feel like it's kinda like exactly like you said, it's homework, because I feel like I have to write this, like, whole page-long thing about how my week went or how my month went, and sometimes it's just, like, I like to bullet point, or I just wanna keep it simple, and, like, I like your memory bank and things like that, just kind of remember what happened, because I tried journaling, but, yeah, it's just sometimes and I think my brain works faster than my hand writes too,
Oh,
so
yeah,
sometimes
same.
it's like I can't keep up with it. So I'm kind of actually going through this idea of like, what could I do? But then, like, looking at your planner, it's like perfect because I also want to keep everything in one place because you can so easily have like a manifestation journal and a reflection journal and a planner and a this and that. And it's like, and then you're carrying around like 5 notepads and notebooks with you. So it is really great that you've kind of all encompassed it in one and you provide the space without making it feel exactly. I think homework was like, yeah, the perfect like example of what it could feel like.
Yeah. And to your point, I think something that I spent a lot of time on was also the layout. So I
Hmm.
didn't want people to be like, okay, here's gratitude. Let me go to the back of the book now to do reflections and let me find like where I am now in the month. Like it's undated. You're able, like, let's say you take a break a week, you're able to pick up right where you left off. And everything is so that each weekly spread includes everything you need. So within 4 pages, you have the beginning, so your start of the week with the gratitude. At the end, you have your reflection, and in the middle, you have like your prioritizing, your goal setting, brain dump, coloring page, but you're working within the same 4 pages the whole week until moving
Hmm.
on to the new week. The only things that are at the beginning of the planner that aren't incorporated into each weekly spread are the monthly overviews.
Hmm.
So just the calendar view, also color coded, and then the expense sheets, which
Hmm.
I think for someone with ADHD, like it can be really hard to save money and it's really easy
Hmm.
to have those impulses where you just shop and you don't realize that you're like spending all the money that you don't have. And so it's also color coded in a way to track all of your expenses, but also set, weekly or monthly saving goals because I think
Hmm.
it's really about bringing it down to bite sized pieces. Like, how much do I need to save this week versus this year? That makes it easier to get to those goals. So,
No, absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things that always interests me when anyone launches a product, so obviously you've shared with us kind of the creative, how you created the planner, but then how do you find a manufacturer to like print the planner for you? Like that always really fascinates me. Like I get the creative part and coming up with a product. So I've written an ebook, but I only left it at an ebook. I could have had it printed, but then I'm like, oh my gosh, that's there's just so much more that goes into it. So how was that process for you once you had this idea, creating it into a tangible object? What was that process like?
yeah, it was so fun. I think like
Yeah.
the whole creative process and getting it together was like my favorite part of it all. I'm
Mhm.
not like a salesperson by any means, so I do get help when it comes to marketing and like all the sales part of it. So initially I was going back and forth between like an app, to your point,
Mhm.
like an ebook or like a physical planner. The reason why I chose a physical planner was because I was using some hobby trackers at the time, but it was
Mhm.
like not sustainable because anytime I would open that app, if I had any sort of other notifications come in at the time,
Mhm.
or I would immediately go to the other app and now I'm distracted and completely
Yep.
forgot what I was here to do. So I'm like, no, I need this to be like a book that
Mhm.
once I look at it, it's not going to go anywhere. And so once that was kind of established, I started Googling different manufacturers that created planners. I went through maybe like 3 or 4 suppliers before choosing the one that I wanted. But really, it was getting all my information straight. Like, what exactly do I want it to look like? What do I want the cover to
Mhm.
look like? The pages, the thickness of the pages, the binding, the thickness of the binding, all of that has to be taken into consideration. Once I created the planner online, like I had the skeleton of it, I sent it over to a couple different manufacturers that I found online. And you're able to purchase samples.
Hmm.
Samples run, $50, $100 each. So I didn't want to keep buying samples. And so I wanted, I wanted to make sure I had at least, like I knew what I wanted to work with. And so yeah, it was really just reaching out, building relationships with suppliers so that they knew exactly what you were going for, how you wanted it to look, or kind of like the vibe that you wanted to bring with your product.
Mhm.
And yeah, lots of emailing, lots of calls. Some of the manufacturers that I were speaking to were overseas. So a lot of like 3 a.m. calls and things
Oh
like
my gosh, yeah.
that to catch them in their work hours and whatnot. But yeah, once I went through a couple samples, I used it for a few months just to make sure that it wasn't going to fall apart, that
Mhm.
the pages were good. The coloring pages was a little tricky because it does use standard paper, and I didn't want it
Mhm.
to, like, if you're coloring, to show on the page on the back. Like, I needed it to be
Mhm.
thick enough so that it's not going through. So I tested all those things for a few months with the suppliers before finally choosing one. And then from there, pretty smooth sailing. It's just letting them know the quantity that you need and by the date that you need them by. And yeah, it's kind of how
Wow.
that happened.
You make it sound so simple, but I know like you do
It
in a
was
way, but then
months.
it's like, but then yeah, it sounds like it's months and it's the details. And I love that you also made sure to check in with the details. Like it does go down to what's the paper quality and like, does it bleed through? Like that's a huge thing as well. Like I've gotten notebooks in the past and I'm just like, wow, they did not think this through. Like it just, and it
Right.
kind of takes away from it. So that's amazing that you really tested it and it's like you really spent the time. So can you share with us like how long was it from like when the idea like first came into your head to when you officially launched it? You said last March. So, but when you started
Yeah.
doing all of this, how did all of this like what was that timeline like?
Yeah. So I started creating the planner in March. It was a very like high time for me because I was really excited about it. So I was
Mhm.
like barely sleeping. Like all I wanted to do was like work on it. And I was like so
Yeah.
obsessed with the idea. So that part of actually getting my ideas onto the paper, like this is what it's going to look like, took maybe like two
Mhm.
months. I changed up so many things in those 2 months. And even beyond that, once I was in contact with the manufacturer and I received the planner, I was like, oh, this maybe has to change, or like this has to
Mhm.
be in a different place. So a couple months for that, and then maybe like 3 more months for suppliers. So I think I started with the idea in March and I didn't put in my order for the planners officially until about September. So
Mhm.
maybe like half a year, six
Mhm.
to 7 months around that time.
Nice. And then
Yeah.
one question I have too is like I had this with my ebook, figuring out a price. And so I'm always curious, like, how does someone come up with like a price? How do you price a product? So like I Googled and I compared, but then I felt like somebody didn't have exactly what I had. And so that was kind of hard for me to figure out like what's that price point. So what was your process on figuring out, okay, now that I have the product, of course you want to make a profit off of it, plus you have to pay for the actual physical copy of buying the book from the manufacturer and things like that. So where did that kind of come from? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, so I did a lot of research into just the planet or the planner market in general and seeing how much other planners that were kind of in the scope of what I was trying to sell were. So at the time, I was looking at like Passion Planner, Clever
Mhm.
Fox, like all these sort
Mhm.
of like main planners that include more than just your average planner. So maybe there's space for gratitude, there's space for
Mhm.
reflection, there's brain dumps, all the little extra things. So I started there, definitely wanted to be like know at least the range of what I was getting into. And then just based off of features that perhaps I was sure that other planners didn't have, for example, the coloring pages or even
Mhm.
just the color coding, the bionic fonts, which I can get into a little bit. I kind of went from there. I also had 10 of my friends use it before
Mhm.
marketing it out. So I had friends from back home as well as professional women from my job and things like that test it out. And honestly, just asking them, like, how much would you pay for this? And just to see kind of what they thought. They were already like avid planner users. So I know they also had like some sort of experience with purchasing planners over the years. So taking a little bit of my own knowledge, but also what my testers kind of felt, where the worth fell, and just making sure that I wasn't like completely crazy and off with the price and or like overcharging in any sort of way, because that's definitely not the intention. But yeah, a little bit of everything. I did a lot of it on my own, so there was a lot of like trial and error, and really just like watching like a lot of YouTube like videos of other entrepreneurial women
Mhm.
that did it or that created planners and how they did it. So a lot of self-learning, trial and error, I would say as well.
That's impressive. Like the dedication too, as well. Like, because it's, of course, like sometimes you get that idea, you get excited, but then executing it is also another part of it. And that's really hard. So I admire you for taking the time to create it and then go through the processes and like actually make sure that the product that you're creating, like you did so much research, and the fact that you had it like tested out with friends and other women. And it's like that just shows like you also stand by so much for your product as well, which is huge.
Absolutely.
And then I want to touch on something because right before the call, you mentioned you are also a DJ. And
I
so
am.
I know I'm like, I kept trying to figure out, I'm like, how can we tie this in? But like, so, and you sound like a multifaceted woman, you have different interests. So can you share with us a little bit about DJing? And then is that your full time job, or like, what else do you do?
Yeah, so I do have a lot of hobbies. Not a lot. I do like to try new things. I have like 3 or 4 hobbies that I'm really like committed to, I guess you would say,
Hmm.
which is another reason for the planner. It's like I
Yeah.
need to carve out the space to do everything so that I'm not, or
Hmm.
at least like practice a little bit of everything each week so I'm not completely forgetting it. And so with DJing, I've always been a huge music lover, particularly like house. I'm in Chicago. We love house
Yeah.
music,
Yep.
disco, funk, techno, all of that. And so the DJing part, I've always had interest and I've purchased like equipment to help me learn how to DJ and whatnot. But I would say within the last 3 years, like of creating the planner and being more organized with my hobbies, I was able to carve out time to learn how to DJ like vinyl records, which had always
Wow.
been a bigger goal for me. And so, yeah, I love the manual process of mixing vinyl records versus like a digital computer or like the digital equipment that's being used. So, yeah, that's kind of what I do. Lis Montoya is also like my DJ name, in which I use online. But yeah, DJing, music, language learning. I
Mm.
speak a couple of languages, and I also like self-taught over the last couple years using planner and being able to stay
Yeah.
organized and on top of all my notes and all that, and piano. So I also play
Yeah.
piano.
I see the piano. Yeah. Nice. I was wondering, I was like, that looks like a piano behind her, but I wasn't quite sure. So, wow. Going back to quickly languages. So, which languages do you speak?
English, Spanish, and Japanese. I actually just
Nice.
got my certificate last December from DePaul University for Japanese language level
Nice.
4, and I'm going for like the next level up next December. But yeah, really like all self-taught. Now I currently have a tutor that I see weekly because it's important to talk and like conversate in the language
Mm-hmm.
more than anything. Like you can learn the grammar, you can
Mm-hmm.
learn everything, how to read, how to write it, but if you don't speak it or practice speaking it, like it's not going to go anywhere. So I see her now and that's been
Yep.
helping. I don't know where I find the motivation to like keep going with. I feel like I'm just too deep in to the hobby now that I can't let it
Mm-hmm.
go, because for me
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it'd be a waste because I've gone this far.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, my planner helps me keep on top of all of that and make the space. And if there's a week where I didn't get to practice this or didn't get to study that, like I'm making it a goal to prioritize it the next week so that
Mm-hmm.
it's front seat, it's in the spotlight, and it'll get done. So
Wow, that's amazing. No, I really resonate with having multiple hobbies. Like, not only do I have my business, I have the podcast, and then I do yoga, and like there's so much more that I want to do. Then I was like, oh, maybe I should get my MBA, and I was like, I should do this. And
yes.
it's like,
I was
I'm
like,
like,
should I
oh
go
my
to ed
god,
school?
yeah, exactly. And I'm just like, okay, well, let's like talk about like, I was like, okay, let's figure out how much time in a day, there is that, how many hours in a day. And like languages, that's something like I've always wanted to learn, like Arabic. I thought that was a really like beautiful language, like especially the
Beautiful.
writing. And because it was actually between Japanese and Arabic, and I've kind of always been thinking about it, but I'm just like, I don't know. Do I have time to learn another language? Because I don't have anybody around me that I could even speak with. Like, that's another thing. So I admire you for having so many interests and kind of just like fully jumping in. Because I think that's something too, is like, you can have an interest here and there. And I've had some interests that I've just like, there's a few now that I'm growing and changing and evolving. There's a few interests now that I'm kind of stepping back away from to make space for new interests. And that's, of course, it's going to happen. We're evolving, we're changing, we're growing, and we learn about new things. But it just makes more sense too about your planner and being able to do everything, because I get asked the question a lot oftentimes is like, Katerina, how do you do it? Like, you have the podcast, you have your own company, you have this, you have that. And I'm like, well, for me, it's staying organized. I have to-do lists like everywhere.
Yeah.
I've got color-coded to-do lists. I've got on my computer, in my notebook, everything. But it's staying organized and then prioritizing. Like, you really hit the note there with the prioritizing, is like, you have to prioritize it. And if it's something that you're passionate about, that you want to do, you make the time for it.
Yeah, I think exactly that. That was the biggest part for me. And even just having it written down, like even before creating the planner, as I mentioned, having it written down made such a big difference. I don't know what it is, but it's just like seeing it on the paper. And now I'm like, okay, it has to get done now.
Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. And for me, it helps with anxiety is if I feel like my brain is like going 1,000 miles per hour and it's like, oh my gosh, you have to do this, 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 and this. The moment I write it down, I'm like, oh, that actually wasn't that much. Like, relax.
Yeah, it's all like scribbles in your head. And then
Mhm.
when you write it down, you can see it.
Yep, exactly. And I end up looking like there was something I had the other day and I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to take all day. And I wrote down and it ended up being like 4 things and I got it done in
Yes.
like 2 hours.
Yes, it's crazy. It's really crazy the power of writing things down, but it works. I mean, I can definitely
Mhm.
vouch for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Same, same. Well, Liz, thank you so much for taking the time to come on From the Honeycomb to share about your planner. I have really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like we have a very similar mindset when it comes to what we want to do, how many goals we have and things to do, and staying organized. And I think the planner that you have created is really beautiful. And I think it really, like I said, I admire the time you took to do it, to work on it, and to really create something that is going to help so many women and entrepreneurs and anybody who wants to, stay organized while working on all of their hobbies.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on. This was awesome. It's honestly the first time I've really got to talk about it. So thank you for shining that light on
Oh,
me.
really? Oh my gosh. Yeah. I was like, how did I find you on Instagram? I was kind of thinking about that. I was like, I don't know. I found you somehow.
We crossed
I
paths.
stumbled,
It's meant
somehow
to
we
be.
crossed paths. Exactly. It was meant to be. And I saw it because so quickly when I was working on my ebook, I was thinking about releasing a planner with it. And I was like going back and forth, and I'm like, but I wasn't as passionate about it. It was something that I was like, and in my ebook, there's one page that kind of actually looks similar to yours, where I have like the priorities, like what is your number one priority? But I end up thinking I need multiple pages for it, and I just ended up not being a part of the ebook. But yeah, which if anybody listening, it's the ebook to start your own architecture firm, which I know there's an ad at the beginning of it, but so that's the ebook I'm talking about. But yeah, so I like the planner that you've created because that's exactly how my brain works.
I'm glad. Oh, that makes me feel so great. Seriously. Because that's
Yeah.
why I
Oh,
created it. I'm glad it makes
no.
sense.
Yeah, it does. And Liz, where can everybody find you?
Yes, so you can get the planner at spicybrains.co, not com, co. Actually, the
Mhm.
.com subdomain was taken and it's like $5,000. I guess it's like a
What?
popping name now or something like
Interesting,
that,
interesting.
but it's .co. And then on Instagram, spicybrains with an underscore at the end, and then TikTok also spicybrains with an underscore at the end.
Perfect. I'll provide a link in the show notes for everyone, so be sure to check it out, Spicy Brains. It's a very cool planner, so definitely check it out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of From the Honeycomb podcast. As we conclude, I want to express my gratitude for joining me in today's episode. I hope you have found it insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate, review, and click that like button so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to share this with your friends. You can follow me on Instagram at From the Honeycomb Podcast, and you can also further your support of From the Honeycomb by visiting the Patreon link provided in the show notes. Your contribution helps make more episodes possible. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe to my monthly newsletter, A Spark of Positive Energy, that comes out on the 7th of each month. Thank you so much, and see you next Friday.